Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we're going to talk about this weird, shortly lived, misunderstood Memphis model called the 2013 Gibson 339 Studio. Now, calling it a 339 Studio will get you confused because later on they came out with something that looked a little bit more traditional than this. But for the 2013 lineup, they offered a guitar that looked like this in both the 339 and 335 format. Now, the big difference between those is the 339 is more like a Les Paul sized guitar. But these are essentially stripped down semi-hollows, but at the same time, they didn't cut all costs. So something that they got rid of, namely the F-holes. It's got dot inlays instead of blocks or anything like that. They saved money with a Gibson gold silkscreen, and they gave these things a gig bag instead of a proper case. But at the same time, they gave them a high gloss finish, so it's not like a satin or matte finish. That'd be easier for them to do. And mysteriously, they put binding on the neck. It's black, so you can hardly even see it, but they took the time to do that. But they came with one high output humbucker with a single volume and tone control, and they came in black or midnight blue finish. Now personally, I really like this midnight blue because it's not something you would find on any other Gibson for the most part. And these things are relatively inexpensive, so it's just kind of something unique. I think it matches with the tenon cover here being a tortoiseshell color, as well as the truss rod cover. And they have this all decked out black hardware. It kind of reminds me of a Les Paul Studio Light from the early 90s that they did in a similar finish. But they're kind of interesting and striking with this whole super simplified layout. These weren't really going for the jazzy players that normally pick up a 335 or like the classic rockers. These were more so for the punk guys because it is very similar to Tom DeLonge's signature, except for his has just one volume control. It has the stripes going down the center, F-holes, the bound body. The finish is very different, and that bare headstock. But instead of paying anywhere between $4,000 to $8,000 for his signature guitar used, and you don't want to get the Epiphone version, you'd prefer a Gibson, this is one of those ways to get into that type of guitar. But don't confuse these with the Midtown Series that the Gibson USA production was doing. Those ones just have a chambered out mahogany body, so they have a flat back and they have a flat top that's maple. These guys are still constructed like a regular 335 style guitar. So they've got that maple poplar maple sandwich that's formed into this shape. So you've got a bit of a belly on the top and you've also got the belly on the back. So it still feels traditional in that aspect. So to learn more about this one, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench. However, the guy that I bought this from, after he had already sent it, he said he left a little surprise for his buddy that also watches the show underneath the pickup, so we'll have to see what his prank is. Inside the studio, there was more than one surprise here. So underneath this big red thing, there seems to be confusion as to what this was. I knew what it was just a tenon cover. Because if that wasn't there, yeah, you just have this weird looking tenon on your guitar for no reason. I suppose they probably could have grafted like a piece of wood over it and finished over it and like sanded it smooth, but that was probably way too much work for them. So they just kind of stuck this thing on here kind of Tom DeLonge style. His didn't hug the neck though, it just looked like this. But it's a transparent tortoiseshell kind of color here. It's kind of cool. It's definitely something you kind of have to warm up to though. But they did make the truss rod cover out of the same material, and I think it complements the blue as well as the black finish. But now what you've all been waiting for. What was the buddy's prank that he put in here? When he messaged me and told me there's something in here, I was like, man, you shouldn't have told me because it would have been much more fun to find this organically. But let's go ahead and see what's inside. I did check it out once before just to make sure it was nothing inappropriate. It's just a picture of his buddy saying, "Love me." So this man is looking for love. If you know any eligible bachelorettes for this guy, let me know. Oh, I can see it now. This guy's gonna sell me a guitar in order to get back at his buddy. I'll just leave that in there for the next owner. You can take it out if you want. But what is interesting about this guitar that had me scratching my head for a little bit is how it's constructed. So take a look at the Joan Jett 339 again. And you'll notice once you swap back to this is completely different. It has like a solid body block here. And I was scratching my head. Why is that? Because it's almost like the center block for this particular studio is wider than normal, but then it hit me. It's because you actually have a back control access here, so they didn't have to route this all out to get the electronics in here. To be completely honest, the wood's kind of all chipped up and not the most professional looking, but that's kind of how the insides of 335s and 39s look most of the time. But you're supposed to have the traditional maple poplar maple sandwich forming the top, then you've got your center mahogany block. And these are rocking the Dirty Fingers Plus pickup. So if a Dirty Finger wasn't hot enough for you, you now have the even hotter version. Reading-wise, that's a hot 16.16 k ohms. That is crazy. And what's kind of interesting here, despite being a studio model, they actually souped up that humbucker with a cover, but it just doesn't have, you know, the cover part over it right here. And they made it black, so it almost just blends in. You can't tell it from stock photos. You can see just like how they wore through the finish, they wore through the black plating of it, so you can start to see it be more chrome here. I almost think they should have just made it shiny chrome to make it stand out more, but that's just a personal choice here. Same thing with the bridge, black, but it's been worn through on the side here, so you can see the chrome on the inside, and it has the PW markings. And I bet it'll say advanced plating on the back. Yep, it's original. So they saved quite a bit of money by not putting F-holes on here, and it really does transform the look of the guitar. I think it looks better on the 339 model, because it's kind of like a weird, tiny, slightly misshapen Les Paul. And your control layouts are right here. Master volume, master tone. You can see there's some internal cracking to these knobs. Not a big deal, but one day they might break. Kind of a weird position for them too, because as you're strumming, like you'd think they would do it right here for like volume swells, but it's just slightly back there. It's like halfway between where they would normally sit and where most people would want them. Then moving on here, when I was cleaning this fretboard, I noticed it was oddly smooth. And then it hit me. This is a baked maple fretboard. Those things have this oddly smooth feeling. Like rosewood, you can normally feel the wood grain, but baked maple, it just feels different. Now, I'm not going to say Gibson did a fantastic job on this board. You can see there's quite a few impressions. I don't know, maybe it was after the fact when somebody was crowning the frets or something. But you can also see quite a bit of chewing up of the binding, but you know, that's kind of how some of the new USA Gibsons come, but you can definitely see some wear and tear here. And another small thing I found, it's like right where the binding joined the bottom binding, it like split just a little bit. I mean, is it really gonna affect anything? No. Just barely get your nail in there. I don't think it's gonna spread, but I definitely want you to know about it. But as far as fret wear goes, I did not see too much of it. And notice the black binding. It doesn't really stand out. I'm not even sure why they bothered doing it. I would have rather have kept the price down $100 than have binding on it. Face of the headstock just has a plain black veneer. It doesn't have any model signification right there or anything, and a Gibson gold silkscreen. You've got a black Corian nut with a nut width of 1.68 inches, and at the 12th it increases to 2.02. First fret neck depth 0.78. That increases to 0.89 at the 12th. Moving on to the back here, I had quite the surprise when I pulled this off. PCB in a 339? Oh, that's kind of funny. That's how they saved money. I was kind of curious why they would do a 4-conductor wiring thing and then not give it a coil split, because then at least you'd have different tonal opportunities even if it's just a 1-pickup guitar. So it would be fairly easy to wire this up with a push-pull pot. You just have to snip that off and you'd be good to go. But stock from the factory. Tiny little PCB with a side output jack. But inside here you can see one of the chambered out cavities that makes this a semi-hollow guitar, as well as that solid center mahogany block. And a quick look on this side too. The strap buttons are also black in the usual locations here. And this is supposed to be a mahogany neck. And you know, normally you wouldn't be able to see this, but somebody's actually worn through the clear coat a little bit. If I didn't know any better, I'd say that's maple, but I guess it's mahogany. It's just a rather light color than what I'm used to. And back here we have black Grover tuners, and that serial number reads 2013 173rd day of the year. It'd be like the 212th in production. But it also has the Made in USA and 2013 stamp under it. And it weighs just 3 ounces over 7 pounds. Let's go ahead and plug it in and see how it sounds. all about the Gibson 339 Studio. What are my final thoughts on this thing? This feels so good to play. It feels great as far as the fretboard being nice and smooth. I actually really like the unbound body on this, the whole size of it, no F-holes. It just works. It kind of feels like a Les Paul, but at the same time, it's not. It's got this whole medium chunky neck. Everything about this guitar, it just feels good to me. And on top of that, I dig this cool midnight blue finish. But I hate to say it, I don't like the way it sounds. I think today I was more of like a neck pickup guy. That's the tones I was looking for. And this guitar doesn't have that. It's just a single humbucker. This Dirty Fingers Plus pickup, it was just way too hot for my tastes. It just sounded kind of ice picky. I don't know, maybe I didn't have my amp set up correctly for this pickup or body style. Or maybe it was just my mood today, but I could not get behind the sounds of this one. If I had more time, I probably would have swapped out the pickup because it's that whole quick connect system, so that would have took no time at all and would have been easily reversible. But I could definitely find myself getting behind one of these because I loved everything except for the way it sounded. So maybe if you're a punk rocker, you would like it more than I did, but from a playability standpoint, I was very impressed with this one. Now that my review's done, let's go ahead and review its condition. This was definitely a heavily played guitar, but I think it was lovingly cared for at the same time. You definitely have lots of scratches on the face of the headstock. You might want to swap your strings. They weren't really wound on the pegs correctly. But your truss rod's in good shape, the nut's in good shape, and honestly I didn't see much fret wear at all. Silky smooth baked maple fretboard. It looks like rosewood, but it's not, as we discovered there. You might want to get this professionally set up because I notice around like the 15th and 17th fret, it'll fret out after like a full step bend. So you might want to raise your bridge up a little bit. I mean, the action's super low on this. You might just want to leave it depending on what type of bends you do. But the face of the guitar, it's got lots of scratches and a few nicks and dings here. I mean, this was somebody's player. This is definitely the biggest ding right here on the face of the guitar. And again, you've got the internal cracking of the knobs, but they stay on just fine as of right now. And I'm really glad I didn't let this scare me away from trying this guitar, because you really can't even feel a difference between that and the finish until you're like really looking for it. Then at that point you can tell, oh yep, that's down to the bare wood. Whoever was playing this definitely has some acidic sweat. See, it took off the black from the side of the pickup cover. They went through the finish right here and a few other spots. It's just kind of like a cool, real relic guitar at this point. Moving on to the back, you can see there is some chipping along the headstock veneer. That's pretty common to see, but I definitely want you to know about it, especially on the sides of the headstock. It almost looks like a guitar hanger might have done that one. But again, they wore through the finish right here. Honestly, you can't even feel the difference if you're trying to feel it, so I don't think it's completely down to the wood. They've just worn through the colored layers. And then on this side, it's mainly just cosmetic. I thought there would be a bigger feel difference than there was too, but nope, not in my experience. So a few light nicks and dings on the neck, nothing too crazy here. Back of the guitar has some light buckle worming and some other marks. Mainly some scratches from your strap and things like that, but I think besides the finish missing areas, this thing presents pretty well. You can kind of see where the neck joins the body. That's kind of a common line that'll start to appear. And I want to say you might want to replace this output jack. Sometimes it would give me troubles and then sometimes it wouldn't. So I think if you're just playing this at home, you'll be fine. But as far as a gigging instrument, yeah, you might want to get that one replaced. I tried some contact cleaner and bending it, and that worked for a little bit, but then it still just started to cut in and out. So it might be something you consider replacing. Blacklight time. Blacklight shows us exactly what we would be expecting to see here. Lots of sweat absorption right here. Somebody must be this kind of a player, or at least having their pinky anchored right there. That's how they broke through the finish. And then you can also see some additional sweat absorption here. But no breaks, cracks, or repairs here on the face of the guitar. Just lots of glowing green finish. I mean, for this thing being a 2013, it definitely saw some use. But nothing, too crazy. I mean, it's kind of fun when you find one that glows like this because it shows that it was loved. And the other nice thing is that it's not like smoky or sweaty smelling. I mean, it still smells like a regular guitar. But you can see some stand marks here. I guess I kind of forgot to point that out. There is a pretty good sized ding right here on the neck that I sometimes it just takes the Blacklight to see it, but the neck is glowing more once again because of sweat absorption. No breaks, cracks, or repairs, but again, the areas of worn through finish. This is a pretty cool guitar. Somebody played it for a reason. The only other thing I want to point out is there is a little bit of finish checking where like the edges of the guitar come together and then they rounded them off. It's kind of like the lines by the neck. They'll just start to show over the years. This one still retains its original Gibson gig bag. It's not the best gig bag in the world. I mean, it's not flimsy, but I wouldn't really even call it even semi-hard. It just has some decent padding to it. But you do have a compartment in here, and inside there is your certificate of authenticity. I don't really think a model like this needs that, but I think everything from Memphis got one. But the interior, I mean, it's pretty basic. It doesn't even have like a neck block or anything like they're doing nowadays. So it's a gig bag. If you think you might be interested in being the next owner of this Gibson 339 Studio, you can check out that link in the description, which will take you to the Reverb for Sale page. Thank you, Troglodytes, for tuning in today, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.